Welcome to my Ruby Slippers. I'm Lily Strong from the blog Lily Strong.
And I'm Cilly Strong, her favorite middle child.
Absolutely, always and forever.
Yay!
So today we're going to talk about spiritual abuse. And the definition of spiritual abuse is anytime spiritual language is used to control, manipulate, or oppress somebody else.
So, for this conversation, because it gets really complicated and tangled up, we wanted to try our best to kind of separate the conversation into two episodes where we're going to talk about kind of the spiritual abuse, not even necessarily just spiritual abuse, but the things that religion as a whole can do.
Yeah.
And then we're going to talk more about kind of the personal aspects of like our community and our abuser and how other people have just reinforced all of these messages.
Yeah, I think you said it's a tangled.
Yes, it's very tangled up.
It's very complicated because especially if you have grown up with religion, it's deeply ingrained in you.
Yes.
It's not just a lesson you learned in sixth grade social studies. It's something that's been a part of your life in every aspect.
I mean, it becomes part of your value system. Yeah. And that's not something that's easy to move away from.
Yeah. So the first question is, do you feel like there's gaslighting in religion?
What? What could you possibly be talking about? Yeah.
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 Yes.
I mean, there is so much that, like, especially when we're talking about organized religion, we're talking about a lot of things that are even just at the most basic level. You know, the church wants your money.
Oh, well, that's old. Yes.
Like, I mean,
yes,
you know,
yes.
you have talked about how you've been watching, you know, documentaries on stuff with Mormonism.
Yes.
And a lot of those things are true in Christianity as a whole.
Yeah.
I
mean, it's true. You see these incredible buildings and
yeah,
the amount of money that goes in, and you're hoping that they're also using it to go out to the community and to help people. But I mean, it is definitely a money generator.
Yes. And I mean, just historically, the concept of missionaries and all of these things, like so much of it is political or economic. But when you're in it, it feels like, oh, this is doing good. And, oh, it's good to give some of your money. Like, it's good to give your tithes. That's what it's called?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, like, this is me being a good person who's giving, and that's reinforced. And then, like, stepping back away from that, it's like, oh my God, I'm paying for what? For this beautiful church to be built when that money could be going to, like, I don't know, more useful stuff.
I am gonna jump in with a little personal story because it doesn't really affect me in the grand scheme of life. But I remember going to visit a Sunday school class. Wasn't my class. I was just visiting, and they had a guest speaker that day, and she was talking about tithing.
Oh yeah.
And she said tithing brings about blessings. And then she had a basket, and she called it her blessings basket. And inside were little pieces of paper. And she was bringing the basket around, and you picked out a paper, and then you could read what was on the little card. And she said, this is a blessing you could get if you tithe.
Oh my God. No, that just makes me think of, like, again, like, you know, historically the whole indulgences with Catholicism. That's why Protestantism started, was because they were selling indulgences to forgive you of your sin or whatever.
Right.
And that's clearly a monetary,
right,
you know.
Right.
It's greed.
It is greed.
And the people in the church are just as human as the rest of us. So it's not like they're infallible to being greedy.
Exactly.
And all of that.
Well, to finish that story, this poor woman then went on to explain that tithing is part of making a reservation to get into heaven.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And she was like, you know, we think we're going to get to heaven, but if you don't RSVP, you just never know if there's going to be room.
What the hell?
I know, right? And after she was done speaking, the person who ran that class stood up very quickly. He's like, well, thank you. We enjoy having visitors come and talk to us. And just remember that our visitor speakers don't necessarily reflect our beliefs. Because I'm sure inside he was dying, going,
Yeah.
what are you saying?
Yeah.
Here are your blessings if you tithe.
Yeah.
And tithing is your reservation to get into heaven.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's not even necessarily like gaslighting, but
It kind of is. It's kind of saying you thought you were getting into heaven, but
I guess. I mean, there's just a lot of things like that where the church is an institution and a lot of people are being used for being faithful.
yes,
And it sucks.
it does. And I don't want to pick on the Mormon religion, but
I will.
but no,
But.
I have been watching a lot of documentaries about
Yeah.
it recently, and again, I love documentaries because I'm just fascinated with psychology. And I'm just always amazed at how clear it is as a viewer,
Yeah.
the manipulation that's happening.
Right.
And the church is like, the church is trying to dictate what everybody thinks and feels and does.
Yeah.
But it's like God's not a part of that even. Like,
Right. Nobody's hearing God talking to them
Right.
directly.
Right.
Here's how to set up a church and how to do your finances. Like, that's not happening. I'm sorry. And like individually, spiritual beliefs and like all of that, like there's spiritual wellness. That's an important thing. And of course, people are gonna want to be religious and celebrate that and talk about that with each other. And then church is often a big place of community too, which is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And they capitalize on that. They capitalize on the fact that people want that community. And it's just like, man, because like, we say this like with Mormonism, it's like, oh my God, like some of the stuff that they talk about, it's like, that's insane.
Mm-hmm.
And it's so clear. But I feel the same way about Christianity now that I've taken a few steps back, where I'm like, so much of this is so just manipulative.
Right.
And for what?
You have to step back and look at who's benefiting,
Yeah.
who is gaining from this.
Right. And if it's not you and your own your relationship with, the spiritual, that's a problem.
Right. Because I think tithing was built up, and I might be totally wrong. I've never been to seminary, but I feel like tithing was created to extend the church, to expand, to make a greater reach,
Right.
and to be an outreach for people who need help.
Yeah.
I don't think it meant building grander, bigger buildings.
For sure. And I think, again, community is important, and community does sometimes require money. Like, money is
Right.
necessary. That's
Right.
100% true. But, like, I think about our old church and, like, we would go on those trips to, like, the beach. And, like, we had to pay to go. But the church was able to do all of that. That still takes money.
So to go on those trips, it was insanely expensive.
Yes. And we got scholarships.
Yeah, so I would go and ask for scholarships for
Which
you
is
and your brother.
Also crazy.
Because there's no way we could have afforded it.
Yeah.
No possible way. And yeah.
But that was supposed to be an important part of, like, if you didn't go on those trips, then you were kind of a little bit
Out of the group.
out of the group. Like it was just like they pushed it as such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of funny you made me think of something else. Because I went to church camps.
Yeah.
And then I actually was a counselor working at church camps for a while. And I have fond memories.
Right.
I loved it. I loved being with the people. But when I look back at the structure of camp, it's like, we are going to exhaust you with so much fun. It's like, go, go, go.
Right.
We're competing. We're cheering. We're in a group. We're like trying to get our people to win.
Yeah.
But then as a whole, we're so lovey-dovey and love everything. And then we're going to have you go out in the sun and get like exhausted.
Yeah.
And then we're going to feed you dinner. And then we're going to sit you down and talk about emotions. You know?
That's true.
I
yeah.
mean, it's a little, what's the word I'm trying to think of? It is a little manipulative in a way. It's kind of like, I don't know. It's almost like it's a kind of a tactic of,
Right.
I don't know how to explain that, but
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I think I do. I mean, I know when you have like these sermons or worship things where people are crying and people are, very emotional. For some of those people, this is their only outlet for those emotions.
Oh.
And then they attribute it to the spiritual, which isn't always 100% the case. And sometimes they need an emotional outlet.
Right?
That's not just crying at a worship song,
Right.
And there is such like a big emotional factor that is in that. I mean, I know with like, this is getting back to the camp. Like, I know that generally camps with kids, you kind of have to keep them
Exhausted.
Yeah, you kind of have to keep them active. Otherwise, stuff can happen. But
Sure.
yeah, like ending the day, because that was what mine did too. Is it was always at the end of the day.
End of the day, we're going to make this big emotional impact.
Yeah.
And I mean, I remember you saying that you used to go up for like every single altar call. Do you remember saying that?
I don't remember saying that, but I remember I remember doing that. Yeah.
Which, if you understood going an altar call is saying I accept Christ.
Yeah.
You only have to do it once. But it was so emotionally charged.
I was just like, oh yeah, I accept him. Okay.
Yeah, I'll go up again.
I'll go up again.
Yeah.
But I remember I also said like something like that isn't. That's so showy as well.
Yes.
Because, like, you don't know that the people who are going up, you have no idea what's happening in their minds or in their hearts or whatever. Like, they might be not actually accepting this at all, but it looks good.
Yeah.
It looks good to be going and getting forgiven, and we'll touch on that one more on the other episode, but it's so staged.
It is. Or it can be.
It can be. Yeah.
Just for the record, I am a strong Christian. So I feel very uncomfortable, kind of like I'm church bashing, but I'm really not.
Right.
I'm just trying to call attention to some
Yeah. And I mean,
problems.
being a Christian doesn't mean that you have to accept the way that the churches are.
Right, because, we went through, what was that, the Reformation?
Yeah, I mean, historically, there's been so many issues with the church.
I think even in present day, you can see some obvious abuses of the church.
Yeah, absolutely. So, like, I think this isn't, what's the word? Heretical?
Yeah, I think heretical is, I think,
okay. It's not... Part of the point I wanted to make was, a lot of religion and like the systems around religion, not religion itself, but it makes you feel very guilty for ever questioning anything.
Absolutely.
And
there's so much guilt.
And that is such like a prime, avenue to take for abusing people.
Yeah.
Because the minute you say, oh, you can't question anything.
Right.
If you start questioning things, that's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And then you're going to lose your faith and you're going to go to hell.
Yeah.
Right? That is so disturbing.
Yeah.
And you have to be able to question a church, which is built by man. It doesn't matter. Like, there are all these, like, the crazy, like, televangelists or the people who are just not all there in the head who are like, God told me to do it.
Right.
You can't trust that just because somebody is a pastor,
right,
that if they say, I was moved by God to create this church this way, you can't.
Right.
again, none of us are actually hearing God's voice. We can feel him, however you want to phrase that, but again, he's not telling you how to keep your books. You know?
Right. So abuse happens when there's an imbalance of power.
Right.
The church is saying, some churches are saying,
Yeah.
you must believe our teachings no matter what.
Right.
That's an imbalance of power.
Right.
Some religions are saying, as a woman, you can't get to heaven unless you've got a man that's going to invite you.
Yep.
That's an imbalance of power. And if you look through history, there's no proof that God said those things.
Right.
But somebody along the way said, hey, this sounds like a good idea.
Sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, yeah. We've talked on our own about how the church has gone through different phases and different translations of the Bible.
Yeah.
I mean, the Bible started off in Arabic, and then it was translated and been translated again. And it's gone through, hundreds of years of updating to try to make it a little more culturally relevant. But at the end of the day, you're talking about something that was written in a completely different language.
Right.
In a completely different culture.
Yeah. I mean, I told you about the shoelace thing.
Oh, tell me again. That was a good thing.
Yeah. So this was I got diagnosed with ADHD last year, and I started Adderall, and my big thing was I need to stop being allowed to, look to research anything that interests me, because I would just, sink hours into, just reading. So I had been, looking up stuff about knots, because I had an interest in knots and different types of knots.
Why not?
My disgust is
It's showing.
just a little bit. I ended up looking a little bit into shoelace knots and stuff like that. And there was one blog that was crazy about shoelaces. And it's such a fun blog. One section that I had was media references to shoelaces. As a part of that was also Bible verses that referenced shoelaces. But what was really interesting was they were comparing different versions of the Bible. And there was kind of a mention about how yes, there are mentions of shoelaces in the more recent translations, but shoelaces as they are today didn't exist when the Bible was written.
No, they did not.
So the things that were translated into being shoelaces were completely different.
Right.
That's a minor thing, and it's understandable that they would use a word that people can understand, oh yeah, shoelaces, instead of putting a word that nobody knows what that means anymore. But that's just one thing where the fingerprints of so many people and translators and ideas and things of, oh, this is a good thing, or I have a good idea, I want to write that into the translation of somebody else's writing.
And it can also include unintentional biases.
Yes, absolutely.
And then someone takes it and goes and says, this is the word.
This is the word.
Follow it.
Mm-hmm. And then it's, historically it was oh, nobody else is literate, so I can just say whatever I want about,
Right.
I'm going to read the word and tell you what it means, and power.
And especially, it was a patriarchal society.
Yes.
When these books were being written, men were the ones that were the writers and the readers and the scholars. Women weren't really necessarily allowed to be a part of that.
Yeah.
So if you get a group of men together, they may not even realize that they have a bias,
Yeah. I mean...
Or they might know.
Well, I'm just they might know that they think women are not human beings, but...
Right, because in biblical times, they were like property.
Yes. Yeah. So,
And so a book that was written back then that views me as property has definitely colored my life.
Right.
My feelings of myself.
Right.
And, of course, then how men view me as well.
Yeah.
Because even if they say, oh no, we're all created equal now, if they're hearing these teachings.
Yeah, and like people can think they believe that, oh, we're created, it's like different but equal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they think that they believe that, they can still genuinely not understand, like, oh yeah, a woman is a fully formed human being on her own.
Right.
And it's like, it's hard to catch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting. We're different but equal. I mean, that seems to be like a big struggle for all of mankind throughout history with everything.
Yes, 100%.
So I saw the movie 1946.
Oh, yeah.
And it was an excellent film. And it discusses about how the word homosexual wasn't used in the Bible until 1946 translation.
Right.
Before that, it was a different word, but it was actually two words that were used together. And that doesn't have an easy translation into English.
Right.
And I encourage you, if you guys think I'm being totally wrong, go watch this movie. It's actually really interesting. But the words that were used originally, the way it was translated was more like a man of power taking advantage of a younger man, like a servant.
Right. And I know that was very prominent in, like, I can't remember if it was Roman or Greek society. Like, that was such a big part of society.
It was.
It wasn't about the homosexuality aspect. It was about
the imbalance of power.
The imbalance of power. And it was young boys.
Yes.
It had nothing to do with, like, being gay. It was power.
Right. But somewhere along the line, things got shifted and a different focus got put down, and it makes me wonder how many other things have we gotten wrong.
Right. There's just so many little things like that where it's like, okay.
It seems very hypocritical.
Yeah.
And again, this is my personal beliefs, but I just don't see God as being hypocritical.
No. Yeah. Like, you can't be like, oh, all-knowing God who is perfect and understands everything and knows everything, but here are contradictions that you could really easily point out.
Right, exactly. But you can't point them out because then you're not being faithful.
Right, because then you're questioning the church, and you might have to get kicked out and lose access to your community.
Yeah.
And yeah.
My mom used to always tell me that God gave us brains to think.
Yeah.
And it's so true. He wouldn't give us the ability to make these questions.
Right.
If he didn't want us to.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, everything is communication being passed between different people. One thing that I had also kind of thought about was with Christianity, we're taught if you accept Jesus into your life, you will go to heaven. You might be a sinner, but he died for your sins. So you accept that and you will be free. And there's such like a imbalance of how people interpret that, because I feel like there are so many people who are like, oh, I can do whatever I want and always I'll be forgiven because I believe Jesus died for my sins. Like, that's already been taken care of for me. I don't have to worry about it.
Right.
But then other people are dirty sinners, and because they keep sinning, they must not believe in Jesus.
Right.
And it's such...
And they're so quick to judge people.
Yes. Oh my God, they hate differences. I mean, we... Specifically, we, should mention that we came from a church that was in Texas and...
Southern
Baptist, and it was... There were more than one sermon about, how gays are ruining society and we need to stop gay marriage and trans people are insane and whatever. And it's like, oh my God. This is just being used as a political platform. And I remember looking up at some point and finding that, like, there was controversy about one of the pastors using the platform for politics. There is not much of a separation of church and state right now.
No, there's not.
And, that's not great.
And again, it's using a platform to tell people what to think. They're not saying, hey, let me open up your mind.
Right.
It's more of a, this is what you should believe.
Yeah, and then if you believe otherwise, your soul is in danger.
Exactly.
And that is so crazy manipulative. And like, again, we have brains to think for a reason.
Right.
We need to be allowed to think and allowed to question without being threatened with eternal damnation.
Right. I knew a friend of mine who her dad would read the Bible to them, and they weren't supposed to read it on their own.
Oh my God.
And I remember saying, that doesn't sound right.
No.
And she was like, oh, but it's so much easier because I don't have to think about it. He's got it all figured out and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, oh, that sounds so bad. And now as an adult, I think back, I'm like, wonder whatever happened to her, because that's just setting you up for abuse.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I can go into a lot of tangents from that. But, you know, hey, reading comprehension's good.
Yes.
I think being able to study and really, you know, take apart a passage is very important to understanding a lot of stuff.
Well, like I said, I was a counselor at church camp.
Right.
And every year the high school boys would run around going saying, woman, submit. And they thought they were so cool.
Right.
And I'd be like, okay, so first of all, you're misquoting the Bible.
Yeah.
I don't think God really likes that. And second of all, you're twisting the words.
Right.
And if you want to explain it more fully, the verse does say, wives, submit to your husbands. It never says women submit to all men.
Yeah.
It says wives submit to their husbands, comma. Comma. There's more to the sentence. Right. And it says, as is fitting in the Lord. So you've got to look at that completely.
Yeah.
And then the next sentence is, men, love your wives as Jesus Christ loved the church. Okay, Jesus died for the church.
Right.
That is an ultimate love.
Yeah.
A woman submitting to a man because he's going to love her in that manner gives it such a different picture.
Yeah.
And submitting as is fitting in the Lord.
Right.
So a man saying, hey, woman, get me a beer. That is not fitting in the Lord.
No. Yeah. And I feel like if we're talking about, like, you know, men must love women for however much, I feel like there is an extent to which there's like this phenomenon. I know that there's like, you know, experts who can talk about this way better than me, but there's this concept of like love being like, I would go to war and be like cool for you, right? Like a man who would become a soldier and be in a foreign country and blah, 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 thinking of his wife at home, not I would be at home and help you with the chores. You know, it's such a different idea of love where it's like, I just keep thinking about, because this is such a joke with me and my friends, there's a really stupid game that we are all obsessed with how like dumb it is. It's called Heavy Rain, and in it there's a dad and one of his sons died.
Oh.
And he died because he got away because the dad wasn't fully paying attention, and he ended up running out into the middle of the street and getting hit by it was dumb. The whole rest of the story is like this bad guy who has daddy issues kidnaps his other son, and he has to prove his love for his son by going through all these trials, and he has to crawl through broken glass.
Oh my God.
He has to cut off his pinky finger.
Wow.
And like all this stuff where it's like, it's so clearly supposed to be like, look at how much he loves his son. He will go through all of this and blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, you look at any of his interactions with this kid, he forgets to feed him dinner. He doesn't know the foods he likes. He messed up like his birthday, and he was too depressed to like help him with his attendance at school. And it's like all this stuff that's like, I'm not convinced that he's a good dad just because he would
Right.
crawl through broken parts of glass.
Self-sacrificing, yeah.
Yeah, it's like you want to seem cool by going through hard stuff instead of feed your kid dinner.
Right.
And like that's what I always think about with like stuff like this. You can't just love a woman by like, I think she's pretty and I look at a picture of her when I'm hard at work.
Yeah.
Like that's not what the love is.
Yeah.
You have to go home and like actually love on her.
But I
As an
think
equal.
as an equal. But I think you understand that because you come from a place of abuse.
Yes.
I think other people wouldn't even think about having basic needs met.
Right.
Like, well, of course, they're going to be wonderful, pay attention to their other son or whatever, but that's not always the truth.
No, and it's, I mean, with a lot of men, it's not.
Yeah.
There are definitely men who are fine, but we live in a society that has taught a lot of people that all a man needs to do is just like, you know, be self-sacrificing or, you know, whatever, where it's kind of like, okay, but you know, even these like guys who like have all their guns or like do whatever, like they're not actually getting into danger. You know, where it's like that
Good
kind
point.
of like, you live in America, you're fine. Like, I mean, obviously there are dangerous parts, and I'm not saying that that's, you know, not.
It's not as impressive.
It's not. It's such a show of masculinity, and it's like, where's the love? And
Yeah, there's so many movies out there that are like vengeance. Like,
oh my god, yes,
you killed somebody I loved and I can't get over this all-consuming hate and my life is now changed forever. And it's like,
Yes.
but then you've got this other child that you're ignoring, or your wife that you're ignoring, or
Right.
there's still other people in your life that you are now completely letting down.
Yeah, but it's like this power fantasy almost.
Yeah.
Of like, I want to, you know, be violent to show my love.
And I'm driven by the emotion.
And like that's supposed to be like the only like that's the cool way
Yeah.
to do it. And it's like, no, you can be like actually loving. It doesn't just have to be being fun or being aggressive.
Right. Okay, so we've got these vengeance people.
Yeah.
I want to talk about, well, I want to pull back in quickly to
Yeah.
the...
Sorry, this got off track.
No, it's great. The Bible translations.
Yeah.
And how it was always, you know, every time they meet together to make a new translation, it was all men.
Right.
And so, like, I used to always think of, you know, a whole bunch of Gandalfs together, you gray bearded wise men.
Right.
But you've got some of these vengeance dudes that are in there, and they're telling us what to do with the Bible.
Yeah.
And then one of my favorite things is the Peter Pan syndrome.
Right.
Peter Pan syndrome is when a man just never will grow up. It's kind of like the forever frat boy.
Yeah.
You've got some of those people in there translating our Bibles as well.
Yeah.
So you've got to remember, everything that human beings have touched is tainted.
Yes. It's all still people.
Yes.
And people should question people. That's
Absolutely.
fine.
Especially when people are telling other people that there is an imbalance of power.
Yes.
Because I really do believe that I can't say I allowed my abuse. I could say I struggled with leaving my abuse.
Yeah.
Because of my religion.
It wasn't, I mean, you can say you allowed it, but it was more of like, you were told that that's just kind of be expected, you know?
Yeah.
You know, obviously in no way is it your fault, but no matter how much you recognize, like, I don't like this and this kind of sucks, you're told, like, oh well,
Deal
too
with
bad.
it.
Divorce
Yeah.
sucks.
That's right.
Bye-bye. I also kind of wanted to touch back on, we talked about shame and grief in past episodes, and I wanted to ask, do you feel like a sense of grief and loss in your trust in God and, you know, the people who you did see as the community members and the pastors and the people above you in the community.
No, I'm just kidding.
Wow, no grief. She's like, I'm free, baby.
No, I think that was actually very hard for me. I did seriously grieve that
Yeah.
because it's kind of like going back to your elementary school as an adult and seeing how small everything seems.
Real. It's so tiny when you
It's
go
so
back.
tiny, right? And you're caught up in a world and a community, and then when everything's shattered, you look back and you can see the flaws, you can see
Yeah.
the smallness, and it's sad.
Right.
It is sad. So I definitely have grieved that.
Yeah.
How about you?
I feel like not particularly.
I feel like you've always been very wise.
Well, thank you. You know, I've definitely distanced myself a lot from religion, you know, the past several years as I kind of was untangling, like, I don't like the homophobia of the church. You know, kind of stepping away from like a lot of those beliefs that were in the church that I was going to. Obviously, there are churches that are more accepting. But yeah, I feel like that disentanglement was such a long process, and I always kind of felt a little excluded from my community. So to me, it wasn't so much a sense of grief as much as kind of having to like slowly unpack that shame of like,
Yeah.
I was in the wrong for certain things that I believed, certain things that I stood firm on, you know, because I was homophobic for a while, and I had said something, like, I wasn't ever a bully, but having to unpack, like, okay, so I stood so firm on these beliefs, and I was so wrong. There's shame to that, but I don't think I've ever grieved because I felt a relief that I wasn't really just being watched and judged by this God who hated, you know, humanity for human things.
Yeah. It's just interesting you saying that because you do stand firm in beliefs.
Yeah, I'm stubborn.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't meaning you personally.
Oh, okay. I am stubborn. I know it.
I mean, I think anyone
Yeah.
is very
Yeah.
loyal to their beliefs,
Yeah.
you know?
And I think with religion, it gets even like multiplied because if you don't stand firm, then you're so much is like shaky. Like it's so insecure if you start standing down.
So I wonder if you were perhaps one of these people that has perpetuated the wrong story or been a part of one of these Bible translations that kind of went awry.
Yeah, I mean,
I wonder what they grieve. Does that make sense? Because I would feel so much guilt.
right. I think,
Of course, I'm a guilt-filled person.
and I think a lot of those people never back down.
Yeah.
I don't think that they would have felt guilty. I think if you are somebody who is willing to, till the end, like, say messages of hate, I don't think you're going to feel guilty because there's so much of that sort of feeling of, I don't see this as being hurtful.
In that movie 1946, there is a father. He has a daughter who's gay, and he's very religious, and he's, stuck on that.
Yeah.
And he loves her, but hates the sin,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. And as I was watching this man talk and defend his positions, I was struck by how he's almost making himself the mouthpiece of God.
Right.
Because he's saying, oh no, you're wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that you have other things to prove. I know what God thinks.
Right.
And he was so stubborn.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like when it comes to things like homosexuality, like I can't prove that I'm gay. There's no proof that I can show.
Right.
Like, this is just how I am.
Right.
And there's a lot of people that just struggle with that.
Yeah.
And they're like, well, it can't be that bad. Like, I think about with trans people, you know, people are like, whatever, just, you know, deal with it. You're not born with the wrong parts. It's just a mental disorder, and you just need to like live with it without transitioning. And then it's like you'll hear stories of people who like, oh, what's She's the Man? Do you know that movie?
Mm-mm.
It's a movie where it's about this girl who pretends to be her brother. So she's dressing up as a man because I think she wanted to just like play soccer or whatever.
Okay.
I don't remember the details exactly. But the actress felt very dysphoric
Oh.
in that movie because she didn't like looking like a guy.
Oh, wow.
Everybody can feel that dysphoria. Cis people just aren't forced to. And it's like, you don't understand until you've been there. Like, it's not like, oh, I kind of wish I could wear a skirt.
Right.
Or whatever.
Right.
Like, there's so much to it. And yeah.
I think it's definitely a case can be made that says growing up in religion sets you up for abuse.
Yes.
Doesn't mean it's going to happen.
Yeah.
But when you're in an environment that mentions guilt and shame a lot,
A lot.
yeah, it can really, really set you up to be abused.
Yeah. I failed to mention the whole moral OCD thing, which, that's something that happens a lot with religion, where people can feel like this anxiety of like, oh God, I questioned something. Or sorry, oh gosh, I questioned something, because you can't say God's name in vain, even though that's not what saying God's name in vain means. Oh no, I questioned something. Oh God, I'm a terrible person and I need to make sure that I prove that I am not bad because I question why this verse was worded this way. That's such an easy thing to fall into with religion, because it's like,
Yeah.
it does feel like if you question anything, there's something wrong with you.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're going to wrap up for today, and we're going to continue our talk about spiritual abuse in part 2, and it's going to be a little more personal stories for that one. So, until we talk to you guys again, just remember, like Dorothy, there's no place like home.
And home is where you can be curious.